Mr. Speaker, I am indeed humbled as I rise in support of this estimate of revenue and expenditure for the period 2025-2026 put forward by the member for Castries East and Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I stay humble and I smile as I have been handpicked by the people of Grosley to be here. And I can say boldly to them that with this Honorable Prime Minister and me as their humble servant, there's a lot to smile about, given the work completed in last year's budget and a lot in store for them coming out of this budget, Mr. Speaker. As such, Mr. Speaker, please grant me leave as I once again thank the people of Grosley for bestowing their confidence in me as their parliamentary representative and for their unwavering patience over the last year. Let me take this opportunity to remind them again that unlike my predecessor, I am not hiding, but I am buried under the stack of work that was not done by them that I must complete on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, I have been with them from day one, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me also thank the Almighty God who have blessed me with the desire, the ambition, and the temperament to represent the people of Grosley, the largest constituency in the OECS. While I thank the Most High, permit me, Mr. Speaker, to thank my mom, Caroline Casimir, and the entire Casimir family who has been with me through the years, Mr. Speaker. Let me also, Mr. Speaker, thank my father, Stephen Gustav, and the Gustav family who are loyal and devoted soldiers in this battle. Mr. Speaker, let me also thank the members of the SLP Women's Organization for their unwavering support for me in Grosley. Let me also thank the elderly caregivers, Prudy and the team, who worked so hard to render a service to this vast constituency. Let me also thank, Mr. Speaker, the Grosley SLP constituency group with Mr. Kenny Hyacinth and the team, the Grosley Mayor, Mr. Lennox Dupal and his constituency council for their work in the last year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me also thank the staff at the Bois de Wage, Mr. Speaker, including Sharik Smith, Kelly Pierre-Louis, Nicola Doveille, Loic Mouillon, Elva Florton, Meander Ajayeb, Bianca Alcide, Teresa Clovis, and of course, those on the ground, including the likes of Malika Cox, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me also thank the Honorable Prime Minister who continues to bestow his trust in me and make the resources available to me to work on behalf of the people of Grosley. But Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to present to this Honorable House some of what we were able to achieve 2024-2025 in the ministry and the constituency, Mr. Speaker, as we look to this estimate to see what comes next for the people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the St. Lucian economy experienced another year of economic growth of over 3%, Mr. Speaker. 3.9% to be specific. Youth unemployment, Mr. Speaker, is at its lowest, Mr. Speaker, hovering just around 13%, Mr. Speaker, while our overall unemployment rate is just over 8%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we had an increase in economic activities that allowed our revenue to increase by over $300 million, Mr. Speaker. And some can jump high and they can jump low, but it was this Honorable Prime Minister who ensured that the back pay of civil servants from the time they were in government was paid, Mr. Speaker. They can jump high and they can jump low, but it is this government under this Prime Minister that ensured that another back pay was paid during this administration, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they can jump high and they can jump low, but it was this Minister of Finance who ensured that there was an increase to the civil servants of this country, Mr. Speaker. And they can jump high and jump low, but it was this government who gave every civil servant in December a bonus of $500, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, for good measure, the Prime Minister ensured that youth and sports continued to flourish. And so, Mr. Speaker, these estimates, Mr. Speaker, under head 54, Mr. Speaker, for the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports, Mr. Speaker, we see a capital expenditure of $2.3 million, reflected similar to last year, Mr. Speaker. Like our financial indicators, youth development and sports is heading in the right direction. In last year's budget, Mr. Speaker, we made the strategic decision, Mr. Speaker, that would ensure that $200,000 was made available to Julian Alfred. I'll say this again. Mr. Speaker, in the last year's budget, we made the strategic decision to ensure that $200,000 was made available to Julian Alfred. This meant, Mr. Speaker, that she would not have to find a job after graduating from the University of Texas. She did not have to worry about her rent after graduating from the University of Texas, about her physiotherapy, about her training sessions, about her nutrition, Mr. Speaker. She did not have to worry because this government ensured that on a monthly basis she was supported, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and we saw that she only had one job: bring a medal to this country, Mr. Speaker. Bring a global medal to this country. And she worked hard, and she strived, and she persevered. And for the first time in the history of St. Lucia, we have 2 Olympic medals, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, given what happened to her when she was at school in Jamaica, given what happened to her under the previous administration, one is left to wonder what could have been had she not been blessed with this St. Lucia Labour Party government, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, we as a government continue to do what we need to do, Mr. Speaker. When we look at the estimates for 2024-2025, Mr. Speaker, under head 54, we see that there was a positive variance of over $2.8 million between the approved recurrent expenditure and the revised estimates. What was achieved by Julian Alfred, Mr. Speaker, it contributed to this, as we had to celebrate her achievement, Mr. Speaker, in a way that was befitting. So, Mr. Speaker, we saw the grants and contribution increase by 29% due to the transfer from the Department of Finance, a contingency vote, Mr. Speaker, of $1 million to Julian Alfred, Mr. Speaker, after her historic performance. Mr. Speaker, this came from the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Speaker. Yet, Mr. Speaker, we saw on a Sunday a former member for Soufrière who lives on balcony is over the Soufrière mini stadium take to a platform and say that we took $1 million from the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports budget and gave it to Julian Alfred. And there was no school sports. I will say this again. The Minister of Finance ensured that $1 million from the contingency vote was transferred to Julian Alfred. Yet, Mr. Speaker, a former member for Soufrière, it will always be former, took platform. His house oversees the Soufrière mini stadium where school sports is ongoing and says that there was no school sports, Mr. Speaker. Can you believe that? And there was no school sports because we use all the money for Julian Alfred, Mr. Speaker. So far from the truth, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, we soldiered on. During the last financial year, we indicated to cricketers of this land that we were going to ensure that if they perform well, that we would develop a high-performance center specific to them that would ensure that they were given finances at the end of every month, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, not only is St. Lucia Caribbean Premier League champions for the first time, Mr. Speaker, but we now have 11 male and female cricketers playing regional and international cricket. The first time in our history. These young cricketers are in a program where they don't have to worry about a salary at the end of the month because they are compensated. They don't have to worry about group dynamics before competition because they train together every day, Mr. Speaker. And we'll be talking a lot more about that during the policy debate, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we continue to soldier on. During the last financial year, we promised the footballers in this nation that they too will be given special attention by this government. And so, Mr. Speaker, for the first time in the history of St. Lucia, we instituted a semi-professional football league, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this begs the question. Qui ça yo te ka fait, Mr. Speaker? What were they doing for almost 6 years in government, in youth and sports development? I have identified 3 new initiatives so far. 3. And I've just started. But they had 5 years, went into a 6th year, and sports in this country was an autopilot. And yeah, Patek Afet. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we look at the estimates for 2024-2025, we see this positive variance over the approved recurrent expenditure as we took $107,414 to facilitate the establishment of a secretariat for the semi-professional football league. The consulting services and commissions vote also covered the salaries of their staff, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the youth of this country continue to progress under this administration. Mr. Speaker, as of December 2024, there was over 1,153 grants awarded to young people through the youth economy agencies. I didn't say as of March. As of December 2024, over 1,153 grants awarded to young people in this country through the youth economy. This equates to over $4.5 million pumped into the youth of this country as it pertains to developing the skills and the capabilities in business. Mr. Speaker, tell me what initiative the previous government had for youth in business, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these are young men and women who had no means of obtaining finances, Mr. Speaker, through the banks and through their mothers and their fathers, Mr. Speaker. These are young men and women in this country who had a skill, went to the agency, Mr. Speaker, without any collateral, Mr. Speaker, without any vehicle, Mr. Speaker, any asset, and they were able to kickstart their business, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this administration also invested a further $1 million in training and development of the skills of these young individuals in business, Mr. Speaker. Marketing, product development, financing, Mr. Speaker. I challenge anyone to tell me what was done for young people in business before this present government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our youth officers and youth workers continue to work hard on the ground while we attempt to fortify the efforts with youth organizations. And Mr. Speaker, in the budget, we see an extra $30,000 in grants, contributions, and subvention to support the St. Lucia Cadet Corps, Junior Achievers, the St. Lucia Scouts Association, and of course, the youth councils, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is quite obvious that to develop sports, we need quality, well-maintained infrastructure, and so as a ministry, we have embarked on the systematic approach to the rehabilitation of sporting facilities. And so, we will be investing in 15 of the 90 playing fields and courts in this nation in this financial year, Mr. Speaker. I will leave the rest for the policy debate, Mr. Speaker. The member for Ancillary Canneries, no. Otago Court, Ancillary Field, Canneries Field. Mr. Speaker, alternative sports. When I had discussions in certain quarters, Mr. Speaker, I often ask, again, what new initiative was proposed by the previous administration? Mr. Speaker, for years in this country, the sum total of young people involved in the alternative sports is more than young people involved in the traditional sports, Mr. Speaker. Video games, Mr. Speaker. Chess, Mr. Speaker. Darts, AutoCAT, Mr. Speaker. And the likes, Mr. Speaker. And what was the policy direction for these young people? Mr. Speaker, it took this government to institute an alternative sports department. And now, Mr. Speaker, except for boxing, chess is the fastest growing sport in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Chess started, Mr. Speaker, with a membership of under 100, blossomed to about 250, and now in schools and communities, the St. Lucia Chess Association can boast of having over 500 members, Mr. Speaker. What new initiative, I ask young people, did this previous government set out, Mr. Speaker? And so, Mr. Speaker, darts, drag racing, dominoes, shooting, sport fishing continues to grow, Mr. Speaker. And in the policy debate, we'll be speaking about a venue for drags, Mr. Speaker, in the south of this island, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I am indeed encouraged by what I see from this year's budget, and I feel confident that the people of Grosley will be saying after this year, this is my young son, in whom I am well pleased, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Head 46, Ministry of Tourism, Mr. Speaker, we see a capital expenditure of $7.7 million, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I continue to say that Grosley Friday night is the biggest community tourism product in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. I may even go a step further and say that this has grown to a level where it is very difficult to identify a community tourism gathering in the OECS bigger than Grosley Friday night, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, over the last year, Mr. Speaker, we've encountered some difficulties, Mr. Speaker. Policing, Mr. Speaker, the crowds have grown significantly, testament to the economic development in St. Lucia. Before, you would expect only the last Friday of the month to see a bumper crowd in Grosley, but because of the economic activities, every single Friday we are challenged, Mr. Speaker, in providing security. And this is why, Mr. Speaker, I am proud to be part of a government that ensured that there was a training vote in last year's budget for 79 new police officers, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, while I do my part with my CDP funds to provide additional policing, Mr. Speaker, and security, I certainly hope and I will be looking forward to the increase in policing, Mr. Speaker, on the Grosley Friday night and in the surrounding areas. The challenge also is due to the expansion of the event, Mr. Speaker, from Pigeon Point, Mr. Speaker, all the way to Dauphin Street, Mr. Speaker. And guess what? It's only going to get bigger, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under community tourism, Mr. Speaker, we see in, Mr. Speaker, the Grosley Recreational Facility nearing completion. Mr. Speaker, we were 85% complete. And unfortunately, due to Hurricane Beryl, we saw a significant amount of damages to the Grosley recreational facility, Mr. Speaker. Thankfully, the Minister of Tourism, the member for Castries South, and his team, they've identified the financing, and last week, work recommenced on the Grosley recreational facility, Mr. Speaker. And again, I must remind Jean Grosley that just before the previous election, that we saw something just sprout out mere months before. No DCA approval, no planning approval, no proper procurement was done. Materials were misplaced, Mr. Speaker, for this facility. But under this government, I say misplaced, under this government, Mr. Speaker, we will be cutting this ribbon very, very soon, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Moshi Jazz, Mr. Speaker. Another event that brings thousands of people to the community of Moshi. And every year it grows and it grows and it grows. I ensured that during lunch, I placed an invitation for every single member, save the date, March 6th, 2025, for Moshi Music Creole, Mr. Speaker. May 6th. And so last year I saw the member for Chozel, not seen the member for Miku at Moshi Jazz, but every single individual was given save the date. Mr. Speaker, this event never held. 5+ years under the previous administration. The member for Soufre, when she was the member for Grosley, ensured that the vendors, that the barbers, that the individuals in the community benefited from this tourism product. And now, Mr. Speaker, it is only with the St. Lucia Labour Party that we have Moshi Jazz. Only with the St. Lucia Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, couché. Mr. Speaker, under Head 43, Ministry of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, I must first of all speak to a huge challenge that I, as parliamentary rep, faced in Grosley, and I will admit, it keeps me up at night. I will admit, there are a few more gray hairs in my chin, Mr. Speaker. A lot of it is wisdom, but, Mr. Speaker, the situation with the water supply, Mr. Speaker, is something that this government continues to deal with. And, Mr. Speaker, I must tell the people of Grosley that this situation will not be dealt with in a snap of a finger. And I must remind the people of Grosley that millions of dollars was expended under the previous administration for desilting the John Compton Dam, Mr. Speaker. Until this day, 20%, if so much, desilted. And so we have a situation, Mr. Speaker, where even the pipelines, Mr. Speaker, need to be changed. Outdated, Mr. Speaker. I am proud that this Minister of Finance made $8 million available to WASCO to commence dealing with this situation, Mr. Speaker. And so I ask the people of Grosley to continue to bear patience. I am there with them, and I will be there with them every step of the way. But, Mr. Speaker, under financial year 2024-2025, I must say that the Ministry of Infrastructure has provided support for the people of Grosley. I will say that. Those who insist that Grosley took all of the roads, I must again remind you that almost 90% of the 150,000 vehicles on this island traverses the Castries-Grosley Highway on a monthly basis. There is more pressure on the roads in Grosley. There are more communities spread out in the community of Grosley. And so, Mr. Speaker, I always have to engage the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Infrastructure for more roads, Mr. Speaker. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, during the 2024-2025 financial year, we were able to get a brand new renovated road in Kaimaji, Mr. Speaker. If you remember that road, Mr. Speaker, there was a steep curve near Austin's house, former teacher at Castries Comprehensive, we've turned it into an efficient and wide hairpin bed, Mr. Speaker. And so, 2 vehicles can comfortably traverse the Kaimaji Road, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we renovated almost every road in Beausejour, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can go in any house in Beausejour and put my feet up, Mr. Speaker. And I can ask for macaroni and cheese, Mr. Speaker, and fish and salad, Mr. Speaker, because phase 1 and phase 2 was ignored by the previous administration. And the drainage issues ignored by the previous administration. But under this government, I challenge anybody, just take a drive through Beausejour.
And you won't see any spider webs.
Mr. Speaker. The values of these homes, Mr. Speaker, continue to go up, Mr. Speaker. These are the things that you will not hear on the platforms on a Sunday, Mr. Speaker. The livelihoods of these people in Beausejour improved, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, we continued work, Emerald Development, Mr. Speaker. Complete, Mr. Speaker. A road that for many years these people continue to ask and ask for, now Capet, Mr. Speaker. The Degazor Road, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Brand new concrete road, Mr. Speaker, in the community of Degazor, Mr. Speaker. One of the worst roads in Grand Riviere, Mr. Speaker, resurfaced by this administration. The Corinth Road, Mr. Speaker, on the way, that's another Degazor road that we've started, Mr. Speaker. The Corinth Road on the way to Richard Frederick, Mr. Speaker. We need to start naming our roads, Mr. Speaker, because for 6 years, 5 years into a 6th year, Mr. Speaker, and I tell the member for Central Castries, they have no way they would have ever done that road. And I tell the residents that have the misfortune during that time of living in that area, they would have never gotten that road because there was a Belrose doctrine. And that the only way that they were going to get attention in that area is with the St. Lucia Labour Party government, Mr. Speaker. And we've started the work on this road, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the community of Asu Canal, Mr. Speaker, another area, Mr. Speaker, ignored for their loyalty, Mr. Speaker. Ignored, given no attention, Mr. Speaker. And they're sending everybody in Asu Canal now. And they're driving on the new road and they say, now, Maviela. Person Pavli Wemwela, Mr. Speaker. Because of the work done by this government of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Norbert, Mr. Speaker, another community for their loyalty punished under Belrose doctrine, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and for years, we had 2 neighboring communities, Babono, with Lage and Plateau, and Monsitor, Deramo, ignored, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they used to patch and patch and patch and patch and patch that road, Mr. Speaker. And I said to the residents of Deramo that we know why in 5+ years all they would do for you is patch. And so, Mr. Speaker, we took the bold step of building a brand new road from Monsitor all the way to Rivière-Mita, Mr. Speaker, to join those 2 communities. Admittedly, Mr. Speaker, we've had some issues because of the retaining structures and the drains that we had to put in place, Mr. Speaker. And so we're expecting to continue this road in this financial year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another area of passion for me, Mr. Speaker, was the community of Rivière-Mita. Again, when you hear that community, you understand why no road was done in Rivière-Mita, Mr. Speaker. All roads were just given token attention. Mr. Speaker, Valerie Lord Avenue, Mr. Speaker, has commenced in the community of Rivière-Mita, and very soon we'll be having a brand new concrete road in that community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under the last financial year, in the community of Marisil, Mr. Speaker, we commenced some work on a footpath, Mr. Speaker, and a drain, Mr. Speaker, that the persons in this community have been asking for a very long time. Mr. Speaker, Piat, the worst road in Grosley when I went door to door was what I call Hazel's Road in Piat. This road, Mr. Speaker, destroyed every tire in its path, every ambushing in its path. Mr. Speaker, persons had to park on the main road, Mr. Speaker, and walk very long ways, Mr. Speaker. But finally, Mr. Speaker, under this administration, roadworks commenced in the worst road in Grosley, Mr. Speaker. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the people of Bella Rosa, the last time they got any attention from any government was under the member for Soufrière, Mr. Speaker. And they said, despite going up and down in the constituency office, Mr. Speaker, they received zero attention. And now we have a brand new, continued concrete road in Bella Rosa, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, when you have a constituency the size of Grosley, you hit the ground running early. And that is what I did, Mr. Speaker. Despite this, Mr. Speaker, we have many, many more roads that we need. Mr. Speaker, Labon. We still have 3 critical roads in Labon. And I will say, and I'll single out the Cherry Road, that, Mr. Speaker, that really needs to be done in Labon, Mr. Speaker. Degazor, we started work on, again, no name for the road, so Mikey Pilgrim's Road. We've done the Wasco work, Mr. Speaker, for the water and the main line, Mr. Speaker. But the road leading into that community, Mr. Speaker, the works have started and will continue. Inglewood, Mr. Speaker, that loop road. Montsepa, Mr. Speaker, 4 roads still needed in that community. And we will see the road leading to Rocket. I think everybody knows Rocket. And that community, Mr. Speaker, we'll see work commencing next week, Mr. Speaker, on the main water line, Mr. Speaker, and thereafter the road, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Asu Canal, we still have 1 road left, Mr. Speaker. White Rock, 3. Corinth, 14 roads in Corinth. Marisil, top of the world, 5. Bois de Vache, 3. Rodney Heights, 4. And these are roads that have been measured, costed, and presented by a humble servant to the Ministry of Infrastructure. Sugar City, Monjiro, 6. Lafay, Kaimage, 4. Rivière Tito Fair, 4. Deramo, 4. Moshi, New Development, Ravin Makok, Maguetut, 8. Rodney Bay, 5. Bonte, 6. Beausejour, 4. Casaba, 4. Cap Estate, Mr. Speaker, 12 roads in need of immediate attention, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member for Central Castries is absolutely right. We need an entire budget of roads in a constituency that, as we speak, somebody is moving into. As we speak, Amunga Shaye, Mr. Speaker, in Grosley, Mr. Speaker. Somewhere in Grosley, somebody is moving to our sweet paradise, Mr. Speaker. Some of them are dispersing far and wide, Mr. Speaker, setting up communities, Mr. Speaker, that they must drive on. And the pressure is on your humble servant to get it done for them. But I can say to them, Mr. Speaker, that not a day goes by that I don't lobby on their behalf, Mr. Speaker. Not a day goes by without a call to the Minister of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. Not a day, not a day, not a day, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I ask for patience, Mr. Speaker. Patience from the people of Grosley. Mr. Speaker, the Julian Hunt Highway, Mr. Speaker, we still, Mr. Speaker, have to deal with traffic on a daily basis. How can I ever stop calling the Ministry of Infrastructure? We need it done, Mr. Speaker. And so we wait for a policy debate where we will hear more on this road, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, still under the Ministry of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, there is an estimate of $3 million, Mr. Speaker, under rivers and water cost maintenance, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we still have issues as it pertains to November 6th, Mr. Speaker, where we saw what happened in the community of Corinth, Marisil, Mr. Speaker, in places in Moshi and Rivière Mr. Speaker, Asu Canal and the likes, Mr. Speaker. And we still need, Mr. Speaker, to work on our waterways, Mr. Speaker. Monnier, Mr. Speaker, drains, Mr. Speaker, needed. We did one over the financial year, but we'll continue to work on it. Inglewoods, Mr. Speaker, Viking traders, Mr. Speaker, we were able to get a road done and, of course, some drains, but we still need interventions. We still have roads that I have not mentioned that we've done. Flamboyant Drive, Mr. Speaker, there's a particular sweet lady that has been calling and asking about the river. Rest assured, Mr. Speaker, I'll continue to represent her until we get that situation sorted. Grand Riviere near Rainbow 2000, Mr. Speaker. Grand Riviere, Corinth area near Wilmer's Bar. Corinth near the Sampsons. Corinth behind John Michel. Windward Island Gas Road, Mr. Speaker. A bridge that is now woefully inadequate given the amount of people living up north, Mr. Speaker. Bonte, Mr. Speaker. Tuya, and of course, Rivière-Mita, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly hoping that this year we allay the fears of the people in all of these communities, Mr. Speaker. We will not be able to do all. We will not. But certainly, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work together to execute as many as possible. Mr. Speaker, I see $1.5 million for slope stabilization and retaining walls, Mr. Speaker. Again, Asu Canal, Lafay, Bonte, Mr. Speaker, extremely dangerous situations with balconies placed there, Mr. Speaker, that we need to get this dealt with in this financial year. Mr. Speaker, the member for Central Castries just said you need the entire budget. But, Mr. Speaker, the numbers don't lie. The population of Gros-Islet nears the population of St. Kitts, Mr. Speaker. It nears the population of an entire country. I want people to put this in perspective. An entire country, Mr. Speaker. And so when sometimes I hear people go around and say, hey, but look, that road ain't done yet. What are you doing? You're not doing anything. Look, that road. And that's what they start with, Mr. Speaker. I often wonder, Mr. Speaker, if Rome was built in a day, Mr. Speaker. When I see individuals go to Pigeon Point, Mr. Speaker, in an area, Mr. Speaker, owned by private individuals, and lobby for this road, given the fact that we have 80 other roads in very important communities, Mr. Speaker, I wonder what's going on, Mr. Speaker. The sum total of roads and infrastructural investments you would have in any financial year, no matter how much is funded, you will always have more work to do than you did in a financial year, Mr. Speaker. Always. I will say this again, Mr. Speaker. In a 3-year period, given the size of the constituency of Gros-Islet, despite all the work that we have done, Mr. Speaker, there will still be more work left to do in infrastructure than what has been done. But the fact of the matter remains that this is the most work done in the constituency of Gros-Islet in a 3.5-year period ever in the history of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Fact. And I challenge anybody, take 10 years of the previous member for Gros-Islet and juxtapose it to 3 years of this member for Gros-Islet. I challenge anybody to an infrastructural debate, and you will see in 3 years I accomplished more than he did in 10 years in Gros-Islet, Mr. Speaker. Fact, Mr. Speaker.
Already does Bill Webs.
Fact. As such, Mr. Speaker, we see under physical development, Mr. Speaker, and urban renewal, we see an estimate of $7.5 million for land administration. Mr. Speaker, the people of Labon continue to wait with bated breath, Mr. Speaker, to own their land. Again, under the previous administration, they told them, go and do the survey yourself. But this government is getting it done for them. And under this financial year, they will finally own their lands, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to see $400 in there to ensure $400,000. I wish it was 400 million. $400,000, Mr. Speaker, for lands, Mr. Speaker. Labon, Mr. Speaker, Deramo, and of course, the people of Montsepa. We've made significant progress as the land previously owned by JQ is now in the name of the Crown, awaiting final rationalization for distribution to the people of Montsepa, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've had serious challenges in the constituency of Grosley as it pertains to street lighting, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if you all remember there was something called a Pajua letter.
Oh, yeah. They promised an investigation. Steve, you're in government. What happened to that investigation?
I drank water, and now I will mind Grosley business, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, most of the communities are now dark, Mr. Speaker. We get calls, we get images, we get people sending poll numbers. Poor job, Elva Flotton. How many poll numbers you have? Poor job. Of people, Mr. Speaker, who are calling out for electrical lights, Mr. Speaker. We have worked tirelessly over the last 3 years. We have a number of communities that we've changed the lights for. And this year, Mr. Speaker, with this head, we're certainly expecting to light up the streets of Grosley even more, Mr. Speaker. We have dark spots, Mr. Speaker, in Rivière-Mita, Mr. Speaker. We have dark spots in Grosley Town, Mr. Speaker. We have dark spots in Cap Estate, Mr. Speaker, some other areas. And I've been informed and been in communication with the department that they are waiting on certain fixtures to continue the works in electrical lighting, Mr. Speaker, pole lighting in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, under Head 37, the Ministry of National Security, Mr. Speaker, I need your guidance for time, Mr. Speaker. I need
17 more minutes.
How much?
17.
17. Mr. Speaker, I think we should start allocating time based on the size of the constituency. Mr. Speaker, under Head 47, Mr. Speaker, Ministry of National Security, Mr. Speaker, the story has not been fully told on the Grosley Police Station. Mr. Speaker, there was a design for the Grosley Police Station. There was financing for the Grosley Police Station. They were in government for 5 years, Mr. Speaker. They went into a 6th year, Mr. Speaker. They rented there. They rented over there. They rented your steel parfait a year, Mr. Speaker.
Sure.
They did absolutely nothing
And they wanted to render
about the security of the people of Grosley, Mr. Speaker.
They wanted to render star building.
Police, Mr. Speaker, demotivated, Mr. Speaker. Police battered, tired, Mr. Speaker. No proper place to rest their head, Mr. Speaker. And they have the audacity to talk about crime? Nothing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Grosley Police Station had 2 vehicles for an entire constituency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think we have about 11? 11, Mr. Speaker.
And you didn't have to do fundraising.
At all. Mr. Speaker, I would have modeled that because. Hey.
You would have bought
No, of course.
Your name is Bradley.
And now, Mr. Speaker, we see construction continuing, Mr. Speaker, on a brand new, state-of-the-art, Mr. Speaker, Northern Divisional Headquarters, Mr. Speaker. And they're going in all corners. Qui sa bébé affaire? Qui sa bébé affaire? In all corners, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I came in, Mr. Speaker, and I sat down with police in Grosley, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, constituency serving more than 30,000 people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, barely 20 police officers. No vote for training of police officers, Mr. Speaker. 2 vehicles, Mr. Speaker. And we allow them to talk about crime, Mr. Speaker. A constituency that would see on any given weekend thousands of tourists Thousands of individuals from the entire country descending on Grosley, Mr. Speaker. 20. I'm proud that the Minister, National Security, has trained 79 new police officers. We see in the Ministry of Tourism another set of individuals and guards, Mr. Speaker, for the people of Grosley, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, bike patrol, Mr. Speaker, increased under this government, Mr. Speaker. Bulletproof vests this year under this government, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, the police in Grosley knows which government is serious about fighting crime in this nation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Head 51, Mr. Speaker, Equity, Social Transformation, you see a capital expenditure of $6.9 million, Mr. Speaker. This financial year, we are certainly hoping to institute some programs at our centers, Lafayette Mothers and Fathers Hall, Mr. Speaker. Austin has been asking for a program for young people. We're going to continue some renovations, Mr. Speaker, for these programs, Mr. Speaker, skills programs in this area. Revemita Mothers and Fathers Hall, Mr. Speaker. We continue to do work and provide some support for these individuals for after-school programs, Mr. Speaker. And also, we've reopened the Deramo HRDC, and we are certainly looking forward to having some activities there this year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under this line head, Mr. Speaker, we have instituted some social programs for our people, Mr. Speaker. In Grosley, Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of young people, and a lot of them can dance. I mean, I do a little dance there for 30 seconds, and that mash up the internet, Mr. Speaker. Far less if they join us in our dance program, Mr. Speaker.
You're a tutor.
We are a talented people, Mr. Speaker. And so we continue to nurture. One of these days, you'll need to ask my mother about me and dancing at Grocery Friday night. She will give you all the full scoop. Mr. Speaker, we continue to ensure that we have this dance program to nurture our talent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in terms of alleviating poverty, we continue to make contributions to our peanut butter pantry, Mr. Speaker, with Venus Cherry and Rice St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Another novel event, Mr. Speaker. Because I remember, Mr. Speaker, that there were some individuals who would come to Grosley Primary School and they did not have breakfast, Mr. Speaker. And so with this program, we are joining efforts to bring as many canned foods, as many waters, as many drinks as possible so that a child can have breakfast before they attend school and pursue their education, Mr. Speaker. This program continues. It's not just about brick and mortar, Mr. Speaker. We've been working, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Ministry of Sports, Mr. Speaker, Head 54, we've done a little bit of work in Grosley, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Grosley playing field, Mr. Speaker.
You have lights there, yes, sir. He put lights in his field first.
The Grosley playing field, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is where it started, not just for me, but for a number of individuals in Grosley. The likes of John Eugene, Alton Crafton, Mr. Speaker, the likes of Leonard Montoot, Mr. Speaker.
Who's that?
The likes of Zeta James, Kiana Joseph, Kimani Melius, Grosley playing field, Mr. Speaker. This is where it started for me. I am here today because of the Grosley playing field, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for years, we would have competitions in Grosley. And again, the sheer amount of people would come. And anytime it rained, there was absolutely no place to shelter. Nowhere. The second it rained, everybody dispersed and they went back home, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nothing was done about that by the previous administration. So, Mr. Speaker, I can say finally that we have stands, proper lights, and we are resurfacing the Grosley playing field, Mr. Speaker. And very soon, we'll be having our ribbon cutting ceremony and renaming of the Grosley playing field. I will invite every single member to be part of these festivities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've continued to do work, Mr. Speaker, in Grand Riviere, Mr. Speaker, Another community for years with no lights and so much talent, Mr. Speaker. We've worked on brand new lights, Mr. Speaker, and we are currently doing the resurfacing, and we are working on a slight perimeter wall for advertising bays, Mr. Speaker. These advertising bays would allow for financing to be brought into the community playing field to maintain the Grand Riviere playing field, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another part of our sporting infrastructure that will be improved and has commenced, Mr. Speaker, is the Deidre Maffrey Community Court, Mr. Speaker. The netball fraternity remembers Deidre Maffrey, who met her untimely demise, Mr. Speaker, as a young individual passionate about netball and sports in the community of Grand Riviere, and indeed as a national goal shooter, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that court was started, Mr. Speaker, almost 20 years ago, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we've recommenced work on that court, and we are going to be having our ceremony to officially name it the Deidre Maffrey Community Court, Mr. Speaker. DMCC. Mr. Speaker, the community of Rivière-Mita, Mr. Speaker, another area with a rich repository of talent, Mr. Speaker. We've commenced work on the perimeter fence and expansion of the Rivière-Mita court for our competitions, Mr. Speaker, in terms of netball, football, Mr. Speaker, basketball, and the likes, Mr. Speaker. We continue to work in that community, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of work to do. Because, again, of the vastness of the constituency, we have individuals in the Labon community that they say behind God's back. Labon deserves the center, Mr. Speaker. And I will stop at nothing but to see the construction of a Labon multipurpose court and community center, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, we move on. Ministry of Housing, Local Government, Mr. Speaker. On the head 48, Mr. Speaker, we see a capital expenditure of $12.88 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've been under pressure due to the National Housing and Assistance Program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, when you have a constituency of that size, Mr. Speaker, the amount of individuals with their homes in need of repair in communities like Rivière-Mita, Monchy, Labon, Deramo, because people look at Gros-Islet as only an urban area. But if I have to count the amount of rural communities we have, Mr. Speaker, you would be surprised, Mr. Speaker. And so the pressure continues, and it's mounted on the office to provide the little galvanized and posts for the individuals in this community, Mr. Speaker, in this constituency. I'm happy to say, Mr. Speaker, so far we've processed and we've assisted over 300 people, thanks to the Minister and the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, Mr. Speaker. We still have 358 applicants. The member is laughing, but they put in the pressure. And everybody sees that everybody that get a piece of plywood, they tell everybody they get their piece of plywood. So more people come in, Mr. Speaker. And so, under this head, Mr. Speaker, we certainly hope to continue this program and provide support to the people of Gros-Islet. Mr. Speaker, under municipal administration, town and village councils, Mr. Speaker, we see an allocation of $3 million, Mr. Speaker. We are certainly hoping, Mr. Speaker, that Gros-Islet gets their fair share. I'm indeed very, very appreciative of the additional support provided by the Minister of Local Government in providing additional workers. But we have a situation in Gros-Islet.
You have 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. But we have a situation in Gros-Islet where we do not have enough staff under this ministry, Mr. Speaker. And so I constantly have to tap into my CDP to ensure that the place is maintained to the best of my ability, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Community Development Services, Mr. Speaker, the Grand Riviere Community Center is 99% complete, Mr. Speaker. 99% complete. And this is under the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, and I must express my gratitude. The people of Grand Riviere are indeed very, very happy.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Mr. Speaker, I have a situation where the population of Grand Riviere into Corinth is nearly 5,800 people, which means that this area surpasses the population of Denry South. Yes, my brother. Just this area. And they had no community center, Mr. Speaker. There was nowhere apart from the school, Mr. Speaker, where you could have housed any program in poetry, drama, music, dance, Mr. Speaker. There was nowhere somebody could have held a wedding, Mr. Speaker, a community gathering. And now, Mr. Speaker, the calls are flocking in. People are getting married in April, Mr. Speaker. People are having parties in June, Mr. Speaker. As very soon, we will be cutting the ribbon to a brand new Grand Riviere Community Center, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under line item 41, Mr. Speaker, Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Mr. Speaker, I see $850,000 there, Mr. Speaker, under capital expenditure. We've started some work at the Grosley Fisheries. We are going to continue some work on the administrative center, Mr. Speaker. And with my CDP, we will be building 3 additional FADs with the fishermen from the community of Grosley, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker, held 52, $16.6 billion, Mr. Speaker. Grosley Primary needs some attention. We've done some work in terms of the aesthetics of this school, Mr. Speaker. We still need some more work done, Mr. Speaker, on the capital. Grand Riviere, a lot of work needed in Grand Riviere, and I've spoken to the Minister of Education, who's guaranteed some interventions this financial year. And of course, Moshi, Mr. Speaker, the school that has given us the likes of some of the great lawyers in St. Lucia, Alberton, Richelieu, Mr. Speaker, will definitely be getting some attention, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, it would be foolhardy of me not to mention under Head 53, Mr. Speaker, Ministry of Health, Mr. Speaker, Grosley Polyclinic, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the expansion of Grosley Polyclinic, Mr. Speaker. Nothing was done, Mr. Speaker, 5 years into a 6th year. Not one block, not one bag of cement, Mr. Speaker, to the healthcare system in Grosley, Mr. Speaker. And now you can see the work on the expansion of the Grosley Polyclinic. And finally, 24-hour service is coming to the constituency of Grosley, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, the year 2025-2026, it presents a wide array of opportunities for the people of Grosley and youth and sports enthusiasts of this country. Let me once again thank the people of Grosley for their support and patience with this government. We are not perfect. I am not perfect. I'm not Jesus Christ, Mr. Speaker. We are not a perfect government. But we continue to work hard, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to continuing to connect with everyone, Labour, Flabo, in the case of Grosley, PIP, Black, White, Asian, Latino, Arab, Bantu, Mr. Speaker.
PNM.
PNM too, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to connecting with all of you. Let's work together to ensure Grosley remains the best, most progressive constituency in the entire OACS, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby support the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the fiscal year 2025-2026. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.